Hi, everyone. It's Sarah No Support Workers. Today, I've got Mel. Now, Mel and I have known each other for some time. So I'm really just kind of like thrilled that you want to be on this podcast and we can talk about all things about sexuality and relationships because it's so needed. Are you prepared?
I am as prepared as I ever will be, Sarah. I'm loving the chat. It'll be good. It'll be good. Good
All
to
right.
see you.
It's good to see you. It's been many moons, but fun story before we get cracking into this. I actually ran into some people at the DSC. I went to the conference last week and they were like, oh, you won't believe who I've got coming up in this podcast. And they were absolutely thrilled. So so if you are those who attended the DSC the other week and you're thrilled to see Mel, please let us know in the comments. We'll get cracking into it. All right, let's go. All right.
Beautiful.
Out of all sectors, out of all things you could have learned, why did you decide to go down the path to learn about sexuality and relationships?
Well, Sarah, I actually answered this for my son who's in year 12 and he's like, Mum, how did you decide to do what you did? And I was actually always really like community based at high school. And it was actually our careers teacher who said, I didn't know what to do. I'd applied, I think, for speech pathology because I wanted to be a speech pathologist. And I applied for that in each stage. But he said, you need to think about it a bit more. He said, my daughter did this great degree and she did, and she lives in Sydney, but she's coming down this weekend. Would you like to speak to her this Friday afternoon? And I said, oh, okay. And I spoke to her. I didn't even know the degree was a Bachelor of Applied Science in Intellectual Disability. And I kind of didn't even know what intellectual disability was. And she was so inspirational that I said, yeah, put me down for that. That's what I want to do. And I didn't get into speech, didn't get the ATAR, I think it was in my day. And I didn't get that to get into speech. And so I landed at RMIT doing a Bachelor of Applied Science in Intellectual Disability. And I have got to say, that's one of the, when you look back on your life a bit, that's one of the best decisions I've ever made. It's been wonderful. And I've really, I guess I specialized in sexuality after this rather fiery, lecture where myself and another guy were in opposition just around parenting and people with disability. So we had this big fiery and I'm like, right, I'm going to make a difference here. And that's how it started, Sarah. That's how it started.
It's kind of like by accident.
By accident a bit, yeah. I think the careers teacher knew my nature a bit,
But, well, especially if you don't have a background prior to doing that course in disability. So it would have been like, quite an eye-opener as you were doing your course.
Yeah. We only had a small component of sexuality. It was kind of, the course was a little bit, it used to be called mental retardation nursing. And so, yeah, now it's more, I think the 2 years before that's what it was. And I know it had changed throughout, but it was sort of a cross between nursing, teaching, when I did it anyway, and we did anatomy and physiology, psychology. Yeah, so we only had a small component on sexuality. And Patsy Frawley, who is a giant in our area, taught that, and I really loved how she taught and, was really passionate. So that's how I got into this, Sarah.
So from there, what was your work experience? Because normally a course like that, you would have ended up in an institution.
I did
as a pathway.
Yeah, I was on deinstitutionalization. Deinstitutionalization had already happened or started. So I have been to Janefield and I did work at Kew Cottages a few shifts, but on the whole, people were moving out into residential facilities. So I worked at a residential facility. Then I worked at a day program, and my first full-time job was actually as an employment consultant. So I worked in employment out in Werribee, supporting people that are deaf into the workplace and people with mental health issues. So that was my first job, which was great. It had lots of KPIs. And then I moved into, where did I move after that? I moved to doing respite service coordination, respite was very big back then. And I was a coordinator at Anecto, the late Anecto.
Yep.
Yeah, as a after hours response coordinator. So I did that for a few years, but it was being on call. And then I moved to Urella and did daytime respite service coordination, which was also a great experience. And then, and then the job came up at Mary Health. And that's where I would have met you, Sarah, because I was traveling around to all the special development schools, special schools and day programs teaching group education, wasn't I? About, sexuality and relationship education.
Did you get there? Because working in groups and respite and actually teaching sex education is very different and quite separate. Why and how triggered this?
I had always been passionate. So in third year, I worked at the Centre for Developmental Disability Health Victoria, and I've worked under another legend in our area, Jenny Butler, and with the staff there. And I became part of a project called the Ask assessment. Have you heard of that? The assessment of sexual knowledge. So that was an assessment that, it would have been, I'm trying to think, 98 when I was working on it. It wasn't published until 2005. It was a project to work on developing an assessment for people with intellectual disability, with a moderate intellectual disability. And it was to assess their knowledge, but also to assess attitudes. And it's a fairly long assessment. Like I think it's 120, 30 questions. I can't remember. And it covers 16 topics. So it's really comprehensive. There's a lot of visuals in it. And it's used as a test retest, or it was. Like it's very old and it's very binary and it's not used at all anymore because it's more harmful than beneficial, but it's to look at the gaps people have in their education so that you can sort of teach to those gaps. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I recall from your sessions how different a lot of people came out. So back then we were in group support for adults, and what they received as special school, high school standards for sex education was very different to being an adult. So, and you could see the gaps, and I remember sitting in one of your sessions and you could just see it was like the penny was dropping, because the way that you were able to explain it, that that person could, understand it and be like, oh, this is what happens. I get it now. I found the whole thing intriguing. That's why I had to have you on this podcast.
Yeah. It's honestly, sometimes I think in my work, the art has been in simplifying information, because people understand things better when it's very visual and it's very simple and it's repeated and it's consistent across all their life. And that's why it's so important to work with support workers who really, apart from parents, know people with disability really, really well. They spend a lot of time, and they are my eyes and ears on the ground when I was working in positive behaviour support. I've been very, very privileged to be working in so many different areas of disability. It's been wonderful. But yeah, Mary Health was a group education. Then I became positive behaviour support practitioner.
We worked together there too.
That's
I am not stalking you, I promise.
And now I'm at Thrive Rehab. So yes, I've been really fortunate to work with speechies, OTs, positive behaviour support. So as a developmental educator, I've kind of worked the best of everything into my practice, I guess. Yeah.
But why relationships and why sexuality?
I guess, yeah, initially, like back when I first started working at Mary Health, that the onus was definitely on protection and got to stop pregnancy. That was the main, that was the worst thing that could happen in life, is somebody could get pregnant. I think I have often seen vulnerability and stood up and advocated for that. Like I remember even catching the bus to school. I was on a bus route to what was back then known as Mont Park. And there were some people with mental health issues on the bus that were in love. So they were holding hands and they would kiss sometimes. Can you imagine the boys at a technical school and that stuff that went down there? So I would really, really stand up for them. I think I've always stood up and felt that people have to have freedom to express their sexuality. I think it's a right. And over time, so this was way before Sarah, this was before smartphones were invented. So I did a year at Mary Health, and then I went away and had my two boys. For 6 years, I stayed at home, and then some circumstances changed, and the person I worked with retired, and I applied for the job with somebody else that I'd never known. And I was employed in the same job again. It's a great decision. So yeah, I feel like I've been called to it, drawn to it. I
Yeah,
just love it. Yeah.
I love the way that you explain things, to be honest with you. And I like we before we pressed the record, I was joking around with Mel guys about that I had a Catholic all girl school education. So when it came to sex ed, I learned a lot in your sessions that afterwards I went, oh yeah, whoa, Sarah, are completely different.
Often people come to my sessions when I was doing group education, or even now sometimes I have, depending on, of course, consent to the person I'm working with, they might want a support worker there and they'll say, oh my goodness, nobody's ever told me how many holes I have between my legs, because we could easily be an older person today who was never ever taught anatomy, was never taught about the vulva, about, my goodness, the clitoris was never talked about. You just didn't go there. But, often you have that people call the vagina. Well, the vagina is a hole in a tunnel. It's part of the vulva, but it's, yeah. So I guess over the years I've got to play with a lot of toys as well, which I can probably get. But at the moment, I'm really loving, of course, I'm at Thrive Rehab, who their sister company is the Clitorit. So I have a lot of those. I use different models. I use teacher bodies. There's lots of things I get to also. And you probably remember the Jackson models with all the bits, the rubber ones that show everything. So yeah, they very good resources, really help support education. Yeah.
But for me, like when I was thinking about it and was reflecting beforehand, I was like, oh, as a support worker, God, sometimes we had some really interesting conversations that you didn't know how to,
Oh dear.
communicate because our jobs are to guide and inform. And then
Yeah.
you're like, and then I remember at the time, I think I was at your courses like in my early 20s, and I would be paired up with other people that I would be supporting in their 20s, and they're going through different stages of life and relationships and sexuality as well. So having to be able to support somebody on their journey and what wording to use, what is comfort, like where does it all sit? Like I felt that was incredibly important for a support worker.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think generally, like, I've got to say, one of the best things as I've seen, well, sexuality is more spoken about now. So I think more support workers are eager and happy to work with me. And I do work with a lot of support workers, particularly if somebody is on the whole maybe nonverbal or doesn't use words for communication. It really helps if I have a support worker that knows them well to add context to things that they're saying. Yeah, I've some wonderful support workers that have really advocated for me to come in to work with people, and we can work as a team. I often provide now secondary consults to teams. I'm trying to think. Yeah, like I also do one-on-one with people and open to mentoring as well. Yeah.
Why do you think people with disabilities sometimes miss out on having the same sex education as everybody else that receives?
Yeah. Well, basically because even though schools are mandated to deliver the same curriculum, so through respectful relationships, they need to deliver the same curriculum, but in a way the person understands. And I guess that often, as you know, special schools and SDSs are quite busy, dynamic environments, and sometimes that only happens well if there's a passionate teacher who really champions the area, researches into it, goes off and gets her own training if they've got money for training. Sexual Health Victoria provides a lot of training in this area. And then I think it works best when they do like a whole school approach, you know what I mean? And certainly one of the people that, gosh, has worked in this industry for the same time I have is Cardi Whelan at Sexual Health Victoria. She's a manager of disability services there. And yeah, they provide a whole school approach and work within special schools and SDSs to get that happening. But it's
Kind of doesn't end at school though. Like it's
no, and
and there
sometimes
and then like I look at like especially coming back from having groups that sometimes we pick up the message and the information a little bit later in life, not at the age of 16 or 17
yeah.
because life throws us all these different curveballs.
Yeah, and often, sadly, what happens is people don't have that comprehensive education at school, and often maybe it's because they can't focus in the class. Often, you probably reflect yourself, I wasn't the best person to focus.
Yeah,
But if
looking
you've
at
got
clouds.
Yeah. And if you've got a cognitive disability or you've got ADHD or, there's lots of things that can distract you when other people are around you. So I think there's a great place for, group learning because we learn really well off our peers. But sometimes one-on-one people get a better and a more comprehensive education because you can check in, you can absolutely tailor the sessions to that person and what they love. But yeah, people grow and change at all different stages. And often if people don't get that comprehensive education, then what happens is they fill in the gaps. And how they fill in the gaps is through media. Sadly, there's not enough representation of people with a disability having relationships. Of course, we've got Love on the Spectrum and there is something now, which is great. But for a long time, there was no representation in media, or people watch porn to try and figure things out. And I have seen some of the most mixed up stories that people think of how babies are made. I can't tell you because they've put together little fragments or, what their friend said, a bit of porn, a bit of what they picked up in class, but they don't often pick up on social cues the way that, mainstream kids will. And it sadly results in some behaviours of concern. Often as people get older and they want to experiment, they've got the same sexual drive as anybody else, and then it's kind of misguided or they make mistakes. And as you
That's a
know,
Pandora's box, haven't you heard?
yeah, they really pay for those mistakes.
It
Just tough for them.
it is tough. And then also there's also some really big myths around people with disabilities when it comes to sex and relationships. Have you but like besides how babies are created, is there any other myths out there that you've heard and you're like, what? How do we get there?
Yeah, there's all these kind of contexts that people are put in. Like they're either just having a disability, as you know, like they're either the very special child or they're often infantilized. So often still, sadly, I'll see a psychiatric report or something saying this person is operating at the mental age of 3. So people automatically think that that means they don't have a sex drive and they can't understand relationships or sex or any of that sort of stuff. But that is so far from the truth because we all biologically are going to
Wired.
go, yeah. And so people are, and it happens because I think people sometimes don't mean to harm, but they do. When you're treating someone like they're 3 and they're 30, it's not okay. But that happens often. So there's that extreme where somebody has to be, wrapped in cotton wool, isn't allowed to explore their sexuality, all of that sort of stuff. And then there's the other extreme where people are like, oh, they root like rabbits. People are out. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're cast into this really sort of erotic, like oversexed. Their
Do you,
behaviours are concerned are weird and out there. Masturbation is really, yeah,
do you,
it's tough.
do you think it's because they've got all these eyes on them? Because if it was anybody else any day of the week, no one would say anything. It's because I've got 10 support workers on my roster, a team leader, a mum and a dad. Is it because the amount of people consistently watching?
Yeah. Uh, I folks, they're so over supervised, yet don't have privacy. They're like a fish in a bowl, aren't they, Sarah? Like people
Yeah,
are
it's like
watching
having
all the
front
time.
row tickets or something. Like there were plenty of times oh my God, I will never forget this story. I was what we'd call a still house, and I get a phone call from the staff member and they're like, they've gone to their room and they've shut the door. What should I do? And I was like,
Gosh.
leave them alone.
Yeah,
It's and that came down to support workers education as well. That,
yeah, yeah.
we're all
And
entitled to our own private time.
we are, and people often the question is to me, but I can't leave such and such. They have epilepsy, so I have to watch them all the time, or I can't, due to behaviours of concern, they might do whatever. But you can actually build in some time. Yes, you might need to be with a person in the shower in case they have a huge tonic-clonic seizure or whatever. But you can say, Sarah, I'm going to let you have some private time to clean your body. You can use a soap. You can touch your private parts. That's okay. That's good and okay. I am going to look this way, but if you're having a seizure, I'll hear you and I'll be here.
Yeah.
I there's ways to build in some respectful privacy, and everybody deserves privacy, even if it's just to be by yourself for a bit. It's really healthy. And so that's one of the questions I, often get asked about privacy. And you probably remember from our classes the the difficulty explaining to somebody with an intellectual disability that a public toilet is still private, even though, so you've just taught, we often teach public and private places first because you can see them, and then body parts again, and behaviours, because it's kind of, that's the stepping stones. So yeah, I remember somebody saying to me, but I decided to masturbate in that toilet because it's private. And I'm like, but it's a public toilet. And they're like, but it's a private place. So it can
It,
be tricky.
yeah, it is mixed messages, but when you're doing the group sessions, you'd have something like that. But I remember one lady in particular is like, Sarah, when I have a shower, I've got to create bubbles. I was like, yes, you
That's
do.
me.
That's how I wash myself. I have to create the bubbles. I said, yes, you do gotta have to create the bus. And you could just see
Yeah.
so you could be talking about something quite complex and to something as creating bubbles. It really is what the person takes from the session. And then I remember watching her going, yeah, I'm gonna make
Yeah.
bubbles tonight when I
Yeah.
shower.
Yeah.
And she was so
Well,
proud because she was like,
so,
that's what the soap's for. Like,
and so many people stand there just, in the shower because it's sensory and it's wonderful and it smells
yeah,
good. And that's why mums, carers, dads have to go in and say, are you washing yourself? But if people can make bubbles in their hairy bits, they're halfway there, aren't they?
perfect. Yep. And it's a way to explain it. But also what I really enjoyed talking about, and I had definitely used after sitting one of your sessions, even though it was more than a decade ago, I loved how you talked about consent and boundaries and saying yes or no and making it really easy for people to understand. For support workers or anybody really listening to this, can you go through some of the ways that you do it in a way that you explain consent so people can understand it?
Yeah, we've been actually, I know time's moved on. We're still very young, Sarah, but we have been really lucky to have Sexual Health Victoria develop a great resource called Consent Matters. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a resource to teach affirmative consent to people with an intellectual disability. And yeah, it steps through, I guess, consent is an agreement or permission and always with visuals. And it means giving consent means yes, and saying no means you don't give consent. I often use videos, scenario-based questions, some role plays. I am not beyond tailoring it to the person's absolute interest. So I've often put together social stories around consent to do with Spider-Man. The Wiggles are a big thing, of course, and even adopting some footage where their particular character that they love is shown giving consent. And I
Yep.
think sometimes we get all, oh, consent is sexual, but consent is actually like, Sarah, do you want my pen? Do you know what I mean? Would you like a glass of water? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes parents and carers get a bit hung up on its sexual consent. But if we teach people autonomy and to be able to ask and to most importantly be able to say no,
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I remember years ago, a mum called me and said, I don't know what's happened to my daughter. She used to be so obedient and so compliant and this and that and the other. Well, she turned 18 and was like being a teenager. And she said something, she's constantly saying no to me. And I said, that's fantastic. If she feels safe enough and trusts you enough to say no to you, then she will hopefully say no if somebody tries to touch her body. So we need to build on that no and use
Yeah.
that. What is the strategy? Do you remember it, Sarah?
Yeah, but you know, it also blew my mind because I think maybe there was, look, my frontal lobe wasn't very not developed when I tell people this, right? But I blew my socks
Miller.
when I realized how many women with disabilities and the amount, sorry, it blew my mind when I realized that women with disabilities, the likelihood of them being assaulted or hurt or something to go wrong. It was like, I think back then it was like 65%. I don't know what it is now, higher.
Oh,
That actually doesn't
so
surprise me at all. So
yeah,
learning that type of stuff. And I remember going, oh my God, because then you've got like a room, you've got a group of young people in this room and you're like 65%.
it's
Dear.
more
Like,
90%. It's
how,
90%, Sarah. So
yeah,
90% of women and girls, like by the age of 18, have received some sort of unwanted touch or sexual assault. And as we know, most of that doesn't go to the police because people can't often give a reliable story. Yeah, and even for people with a penis, it is double what other people are experiencing. So it is a high rate of vulnerability, especially for women and girls. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And I feel like that's so important for support workers to know that, because
Mm.
the likelihood of that happening to somebody that we support is quite high.
And most of the people, that are adults that are female we support, sadly, have trauma past because they've been likely to have been sexually assaulted. And that is heartbreaking. That is hard.
Yeah, it is. And I think that stopped me in my tracks, because I was like, oh, no, like, that happened. Like, I naive. I was very naive, to be honest with you, in my early 20s. But to hear that type of stuff and actually, put the groundwork in, and then seeing how you react to the group and how we can talk about it openly, and a way for people to understand that it's not okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, a lot of the work I do is around consent. I think consent has been a really important hot topic, not just in the disability community, but obviously for young people, especially with the affirmative consent laws coming in. So I still do a lot of that, I guess, work around gender, and is a female allowed to wear what she wants, And yeah, a lot of that attitudinal work. Yeah. So yeah,
There's so much to it,
so many.
but
So much.
I remember at the time there were relationships in the room, and one of the things that I loved hearing you talk about was the signs of what might be a healthy relationship and what might not be a safe relationship, and how you break that down. And you broke that down in ways that probably most 20-year-old girls probably should listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the most difficult things sometimes is, you probably remember me talking about early warning signs and how people
Mm.
need to be in touch with their no feelings and to listen to their no feelings. And we might have drawn a body outline and drawn all those no feelings in. That's not just a disability thing. I think a lot of people don't listen to their early warning signs, or one of the things we try to teach is red flags, green flags, and that's a protective behaviour. Some of the things we talk about, so I might show a picture of a cat being scared as an early warning sign. What's happening? This cat, how can you tell the cat's scared? Oh, its hair's all sticking up. And I'm like, our hair sticks up too when we're scared. Its eyes are wide. It's showing its teeth. All of these things, trying to give some education on the fight, flight, freeze, fawn sort of idea. Yeah. So trying to have people understand their own body, and then to be able to say, no, stop. And we used to practice a lot. No, stop.
I don't like it.
I don't like it.
And you know what? I do that with my kids now because of it. Yeah, I do. And then I talk about body parts when beforehand it was. I know it sounds really
Go
silly.
you.
Yeah, I thought so too. But
You're not saying your front bum, are you? You're not saying, oh, wash your front bum.
No, we call them the body parts. And that's because I remember you teaching, mostly if you know your body parts, you're more in line to understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then,
such a safety.
Especially now. I think also education has changed, and the way that we parent is different to back then. So I think it's more having access to education like this. So yeah, thank you for those tips. My kids know their body parts.
That's wonderful, because if you know your body parts, if you know they're private, you are going to tell someone if somebody creepy comes up. You're going to tell mum on your safety hand, on your 5 or your okay hand. Some of our people could only identify sort of 3 people, or even one person. That's good. If you can tell mum that, I was at day program and somebody said, can I touch your vagina? If you know your body parts, vulva, if you know your bum and your breasts, you're halfway there, aren't you?
Incredibly important.
Very important.
Well, what should a support worker, like in your eyes, what should a support worker do if somebody that they're supporting wants to talk about sex and dating and relationships?
Firstly, I think listen to them. That's really, really important. A lot of the folks we work with have been shamed, and shame is one of those feelings that comes with a change of our facial expression, with a sort of thing. But I think a lot I used to talk about, and still do with support workers, it's around going, that's okay. I'm glad you're enjoying your body, but maybe you need to go to a private space. Maybe the best place to touch your penis is in your bedroom or the shower or the bathroom. So there's some really kind and direct ways you can do that. So that is my advice for support workers, is to really listen, to talk to the carers if they need some further education or advice. There is so much now. Like back in the early days, we used to be cutting out literally magazines and stuff to make resources and
You know,
laminating it. There's so many
do you
resources
know
now.
what? I laugh. I was like, when people talk about social stories, I'm like, when I used to write them, that was an expectation. What do you mean you don't write them and now I have to wait for somebody else to write them?
Yeah, yeah. We used to we had a whole filing cabinet full of like stuff that was laminated, games, all of that sort of stuff. But now there is amazing stuff online. There's safety games and things that kids can play around what we just talked about, the no-go tell safety strategy about you've got body safety doing protective behaviours or safety behaviours. There's so much now online, which is awesome. And I think when I came back after having my kids, the biggest change was the smartphone. I think I was delivering a class and people are passing this phone around. I'm like, oh, what's a phone? I'm like, can you show me what's on it? They were watching porn in my class. And I'm like, what's this? And so the invention of the smartphone has given so many more people with disability access to lots of images and lots of games and porn. So yeah, that's a big part of what I do as well now.
Well, I've got this one. You ready for this one? Support
Yeah.
workers, sometimes we can feel a little bit awkward having some of these conversations. How can we make them become more comfortable? And any advice you have for support workers out there? Because some things are, we'll do the best to guide and support, but they're a little bit beyond us in our knowledge base.
Yeah. Honestly, supporting your support workers are amazing because they know the person so well. And I am often asking them, this is the information I can give you, but how part of my job is pitching it at that right level. You know what I mean? And a support worker knows the level. They know if someone can read or write. They know what language works best. They know if somebody is using keyword sign or Auslan or if writing backwards and forwards works. Part of, I think, building confidence, this is going to sound weird, but if you're concerned about saying a word or you're feeling a bit embarrassed saying the word penis, I remember somebody once told me, stand in a mirror and say penis 100 times. You'll be fine after that. So practice makes perfect and you might make mistakes. But if you've got a genuine heart and you're saying, look, I'm not sure about what the answer is to that, but you know what, Sarah, I'm going to look it up and I'll get back to you. I'm going to ask somebody else who's an adult that might know the answer and I'll get back to you. I think just shutting someone down makes them feel shame and like, "Oh, that was a bad question to ask." But if you follow up with them, I have more faith in lots of your support workers. I think that they can do this, but it's being honest and saying, sometimes
Some
I don't
really
even know the
awkward
answer.
conversations that I didn't prepare. Like, no day is like Groundhog Day. And you're like, and then there'll be sometimes something will be brought up. You're like, never thought of that before.
Yeah,
Like, right, you're learning and we're both learning together, it
together.
appears.
And that's your script. Like I have often said to people, you need a script. If you don't, and mostly to parents, you're going to get a curly question, and you probably had curly questions from your kids. Can you imagine?
Yep.
But having that script going, that's really interesting, Sarah. What a great question you've asked there. Mummy's going to look that up and get back to you, okay? Like, can we talk about that? Happy, I'm sure you do well, and I'm sure support workers do well as also, but it can be a bit embarrassing. So practicing in front of the mirror, stalling for time to find out the answer, it can be difficult because families wholly teach their values to kids. And they do. Like people that come to me often already have their values, whether they're handed down from parents, their morals, all of that sort of stuff. And I'm not there to change their values on the whole. I'm there to teach the law. Do you know what I mean? So
Yep.
I think we've probably discussed this in the past. You might think that women have to do everything that you say, but let me tell you, the law says that women are equal with men, and so that's how it has to operate within the workplace, within the school environment. So I often, doesn't matter the culture or the values, I respect that. People have all got different values, but it's teaching the law. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what
Do
I
you have
do.
Any success stories that you're willing to share?
Yeah. Gosh, I have, I could probably, my friend once sent to me, you need to write a book because you've got lots of funny stories. Yeah, I think some of my success stories come when, and I dare say it because I'm a bit sad today, Sarah, but when there's enough NDIS funding to support someone to have good comprehensive education. And I was reflecting today on a family I worked with from a Vietnamese background, and I think things have changed in the NDIS, but I was able to use a interpreter
Mm.
for 8 sessions.
Yep.
So mum knew what I was going to talk about, could build trust with me, could know what I was, I could having the information in her first language was really important to building that trust. And things were scaffolded over time. So I worked with the speech pathologist, I worked with the OT, and I worked with positive behaviour support. And we turned behaviours around. A lot of the behaviours were happening because the person had never received education, public and private education. The speech was awesome because she would put my public and private symbols, whatever we were using, onto the AAC device. So that was beautiful. We all just worked together as a team and it was fantastic. And I think when somebody has good funding, when there's a collaborative team effort and when everybody's really on the same page, has the same goal and is sex positive and involves a person and motivates them, gosh, then we have really good outcomes, don't we? And I say I'm a bit sad because today's the day when the NDIS bill has been passed by the Labor government.
Yep.
And it's a bit heartbreaking for me, really, and for our sector. I think in 30 years working in, I know I'm a bit of a veteran in this area now, but I've never seen such anxiety and
It
such.
feels like a step back.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
And I think it's because so much had evolved and like you said, people working together as a team back when you were doing this type of education with us, that wasn't having all these people. We didn't have access to all these people to learn things about a person and to support and build them and grow them up. So now it's kind of like it is a step back. Is everything going to go back to support workers? Because as talented as I may appear, I am not the be all and end all, and nor am I trained in certain areas to perform at.
And what is heartbreaking is having 75% of your core budget slashed. It just impacts on somebody's life phenomenally, doesn't it? It's just so devastating. Sorry.
No, it
We
is
talk
because
a
I
lot,
was
don't we?
talking to this, no, I was talking to a fella a couple of weeks back. It's just kicking the can down the line. If we just had dealt with it here, it would never have gone that far. And I feel like for this type of educational purposes, you're kicking the can down the line. Like
Yeah.
we're not going to we could solve a lot of things if we addressed it quite young.
Well, anything that's proactive is helpful. Anything that is early intervention is helpful. Like a person with a disability doesn't learn like that. They need repeated sessions. They need
Yep.
support.
But we
Yeah.
get older and we develop as well. So, you've gone from being young to now we're hitting the menopause and, understanding what menopause has with disability. It's completely different.
And I'm incredibly proud. I've got to say that one of my colleagues at Thrive Rehab has worked very hard with a group from La Trobe Uni and illustrators to create a menopause book for women that have an intellectual disability and older. So
Yes.
you might see it there. Can you see it next to my banana? It's called Menopause
Yeah.
and it's a hardback. And so that's what I mean by amazing resources created. And because so many women with a disability went through menopause, they may have had mood swings, all of this stuff happening
The
to their
behavior
body.
changes and no one could tell you why. I'm like, we all know now why, but how you have that shame part as well because somebody just flipped and they've changed and we didn't understand how to support them properly. I know it's 2026, so things have changed dramatically for people, right? The way that we
Thank
learn,
God.
but being able
Marriage,
to
equality,
talk,
absolutely, everything. I have seen so much sexual change, but there's still so far to go. But yes, I
yep.
agree.
Well, how do you stay on top of it and keep learning?
Gosh, I do. Yeah, I think before you asked me, like, how did I become a sexuality educator? I had a very little part of university devoted to this. So a lot of what I have done has been because I've had great PD. And so professional development from Sexual Health Victoria, from a range of different places. I'm a member of the Society of Australian Sexologists, so you can get some training through there. Through every organisation that I have been a part of, I've been really privileged to have good training. And in the early days, not so much now, although I see, Sarah, you go to a lot of conferences. I used to speak at conferences roundabout and, got a lot of education in that manner. But there are lots of resources out there. Get yourself a really good mentor or supervisor that can help to educate you and check in on your values and what you're teaching. That's really
Yeah.
important. I did a deep dive SAR not long ago, which looks at my deep values around sexuality and acknowledges them because we've all got different values and biases. And so I recommend doing that very frequently if you're working in the sexuality industry. So
Well, I feel like it's something that all support workers, team leaders, wherever you sit in the sector, we should talk about it quite openly for the people that
so
we
much.
serve. So we ensure that they get the best form of support and that it's with their choices as at the front of it.
Yeah, with it's finding out what people want to know. I've got a story. I think you asked before about people feeling awkward and how much information you give or something. Somebody once told me people only take in what they want to learn. Does that make sense? So in a group environment, it was really tricky because I would kind of pitch it to the highest person and hope that others
Would
would
catch up
catch up,
to a certain
learn,
level. Yeah, yeah.
sort of. But I remember when I was pregnant with my second son, my first son said, "Mummy, where's the baby going to come out? Or how did the baby get made?" I think it was something like that. So I drew on his blackboard a big vulva and all this sort of stuff. Literally, he heard the first bit was the baby's going to come out between mummy's legs. And then I started drawing this picture and he's exited and playing with Lego. And so I think he only took in that tiny little bit. That's all he needed to know. So it's about, pitching things at people's level. And I'm thinking of all the resources I've used and we're so privileged in a first world country to have those resources to be able to
100%.
access.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Them
have these conversations.
and have these conversations. Yeah, absolutely.
So
So,
now you're working at Thrive Rehab and you're the sexuality and relationships educator there.
so yes, I've always done sexuality relationship education. Thrive Rehab has been an amazing place to learn. And as I said, so firstly, I was in community health at Mary Health, and that was group education. So that was great. And then I was working in PBS, so I got a PBS framework, which was awesome.
Yes, we did work on that together too.
Absolutely. But now I'm at Thrive Rehab, and it's just an amazing place to work. First, OTs are some of my favourite people. They're very practical, down to earth people, very genuine. They're into skills teaching, part of my training is skills teaching and building independence, understanding sensory needs and behaviour. But there's a huge focus on being an organisation that values gender affirming, working with folks in the LGBTIQA plus communities and being really trauma informed and neuro affirming. So it's an exciting place to work because resources are made. Like, as I said, the sister company is Clitorate, which I use a lot in what I'm teaching. There's a lot of sex positivity, gender expansiveness, and I have some of the best mentoring I've ever had. So that's wonderful. And I'm just learning all the time. I'm learning about pleasure. We have I'm trying to think one sexologist on our team too. So I'm able to ask a lot. Yeah, but everybody there, apart from me, is an OT, but they also specialise in sexuality. So it's a pretty incredible place to work, and I'm feeling very fortunate to be subcontracting to them. Yeah, at the moment. So I'm loving it. And even though some of the clients or participants that come through the door are a bit different to my people, that I just have found that it's such a warm and welcoming environment, and we work with people across the age span with varying disabilities. So a lot of the people, I guess, that come in maybe have neurological disabilities, so MS, ND, various physical disabilities, whereas I'm more the intellectual and developmental disability, autism sort of spectrum. But it's working really well, and I'm very excited to be working on some projects there. Yeah.
So anyone listening to the podcast or watching it, where is the best place to find you if they would like to reach out to you and, gather your services?
Yeah, so the best place probably is to go to thriverehab.com.au. It's all one word. I could probably put it in the chat, where you will see an intro to me. There's a special bit that says intro to Mel, or you could drop me some mail at melanie@thriverehab.com.au. Yeah, so that's probably the best way to get in touch with me. I have also recently, I don't know if you know this, Sarah, I've recently become an end-of-life doula. So an end-of-life
Yes.
navigator for people with
Yes.
disability. Yeah. So
I love that.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I do, because you think for some people that we serve, they don't have family. Like they have
don't have
very
choice.
limited on that. Yeah. And I believe everybody deserves somebody in that sense.
Yeah, maybe that's a different
I reckon that's
chat.
definitely another podcast we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
But as my mum says, Mel, are you trying to work through all the things I told you not to talk about at the dinner table? Sex, death. She said, you're going to get into politics next. And I'm like, Mum. She's like, I've told you, don't talk about money, don't talk about politics, sex or death. And, that's all I've talked
You
about.
haven't gone the other, like, I know you've had kids, but you haven't gone the other end where you started in early childhood. So I feel like you've skipped.
A lot of developmental educators work in early childhood, often in, early childhood or behaviour support. Yeah, I guess I just ended up in the sexy side of things.
That's what you tell your kids.
Yeah, that's it. Well, they're going to be in therapy, Sarah. Let's face it. One day they walked in, funny story, I had a friend over, I was taking him to school and I'm like, please do not disconnect those vibrators. If I've told you once, I've told you. And they're like, Mummy, but I just need my iPad. And one of them said, oh, Mum, you can't tell me that. You're damaging me. And now they just roll their eyes and say, you're the reason I'm going to be in therapy for the rest of my
They
life.
just shut the door now.
I have a private sign on my door and they know not to come in because they don't know what they might see.
Yep.
They're beautiful. They're learning. And yeah, it's wonderful to be able to bring up respectful men that care about people and
Normalizing it.
know about their body parts and know about sex. It's fantastic. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It's so good to see you again because I've just seen you on social media and on LinkedIn, and it's so great to see you. So thanks for inviting me.
Until next time.
Until next time.